Hey guys, and welcome to the Basic to Bold podcast. I'm your host, Jen Bjarnson. I wanted to talk today specifically about our expectations in relationships and how they can really affect us sometimes it's a positive way, but a lot of times it's a very negative way, and it just makes us upset. It doesn't really affect anybody else but us. And how do you fix a relationship when you're the one upset and you're the one trying to push forward and you're the one trying to move forward, but like there's two of you involved. There's two of you involved in this relationship. So the first thing that was a really big aha for me is understanding my expectations were really causing havoc in the relationship. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I was like trying to be an irritating person. I just, in a way, I had things that I wanted it to be done a certain way, or I wanted it to be accomplished. I wanted it to look a certain way. That's the way I wanted it. And that's not necessarily a problem. The problem was I really had not conveyed that to the people in my circle. I hadn't conveyed that as an expectation. I just kind of, because I expected it, I kind of just assumed everybody else expected it that way. And when I took a step back and I thought, oh, I'm expecting this, but nobody else knows that I'm expecting this. Nobody else is wanting this. Nobody else really cares that it looks like this. Then I recognized, neither of us is right and neither of us is wrong. That's not the point. It's not that I'm right and it's not that my partner or my husband is wrong in the situation because he's not doing the thing that I want. He genuinely doesn't know it's a thing. He doesn't know it's an expectation. So why would he do it if he doesn't even know it's a thing? And so that's one thing. When I get upset, that's one of the first things I start to look at what is my part? And if I look, a lot of times my part is the fact that I have an expectation that nobody's aware of. And so can I really be upset that they didn't meet my expectation when they didn't even know it was an expectation? So that's kind of the first thing I like to say whenever I start getting frustrated or I like to get upset, is I start looking at what is my part in the situation? What is it that I'm expecting or I'm doing or I'm thinking? Like how is my reaction? How is my expectation? How is my thinking affecting the situation? And it doesn't necessarily have to turn into this is my fault or this is my problem. Because I think sometimes we easily go down the really negative route of, well, I'm to blame. I suck. And that's not the case at all. Even though I'm holding an expectation that nobody else is aware of, it doesn't mean that I'm at fault. It just means I have yet to gain the skill to communicate what it is that I'm trying to communicate, or I genuinely didn't think of it. And so I'm just putting myself in a frustrating situation, not because I'm a horrible person. I just didn't think of it. And that's okay. That's all right. We don't always need to go down this rabbit hole of like, I'm an awful person. I'm terrible. Sometimes we can look at the situation and say, okay, this is what it is. Oh, I didn't do this. Got it. Let me fix that part. And then we can move on fairly quickly. Another part of understanding your expectations is sometimes we have expectations that just don't really make a whole lot of sense. Sometimes the expectations in our lives are not realistic. And as an example, I've noticed recently in my own relationships, I had this belief system that my husband and I were pretty opposite of each other, which is not unusual for a lot of people. We're similar in ways, but also very different in others. And one thing, I had this idea that my weaknesses were his strengths and his weaknesses were my strengths, which is partially true. There is some truth to that. But one thing I had not recognized is there is an area of our life where we both kind of suck at it. We're not, both of us are equally not good in a specific area. And I was getting frustrated because he wasn't picking up the slack in that area. And in my mind, I just had this unrealistic expectation that, well, I don't want to do it. I'm not very good at it. So he should do it. Like, I don't want to do it. You do it. But he was kind of saying the same thing to me. I don't want to do it. You do it. And I finally had this aha moment where I recognized we do have strengths. I have my strengths. He has his strengths. I have my weakness. He has his weaknesses. And sometimes my strengths are his weaknesses, and sometimes my weaknesses are his strengths. That is true. But sometimes we both equally suck in an area. And having the expectation that we should all have it all together and that it should fit perfect, it should look a certain way, and otherwise our marriage is flawed. If it doesn't look this way, then our marriage is flawed. Then what are we even doing? What is even the point? Now, I didn't go that extreme, but at the same time, it was very, very frustrating. And so I want to challenge you in what areas do you have some unrealistic expectations that you're putting on somebody else that maybe, and what's different from before you may have an expectation that's completely realistic. But what are some unrealistic expectations? Because we all have them. It's okay to have expectations and it's okay to want to achieve things. That's not the problem. What the problem turns into is when there's expectations that are so unrealistic and we think that that makes it a problem in our marriage, instead of adjusting our expectation because we recognize that is a really crazy way to think. And that's what I had to do. It was a really crazy way to think that every weakness that I have should be my husband's strength, and every weakness that he had should be my strength. That's craziness. And that's not a rational way to think. And I would even go so far to sometimes there is a belief system that thinks if we don't fit perfectly together, then we married the wrong people. And that's not realistic at all either. The truth is, every day you have to choose to find the good in each other. Every day you have to find that you will choose to love each other. And that's okay because not every day is perfect. Some days are a struggle, and some days you are looking at this person going, that they're frustrating. But other days, it's so nice to have a partner to move throughout this world. And so taking the good with the bad, hopefully there's more good than there is bad. But the reality is understanding those expectations that are so outlandish, that are just destroying any rational happiness that you should be having and could be having because you're expecting something that is so unrealistic. The next thing is letting other people's expectations influence your expectations. So this is really easy in when you first get married. You came from a way of doing things and your spouse or your partner came in from a way of doing things. And those two ways usually don't always fit perfectly together. So basically, you're creating a whole new way of doing things. Now, this person is like, this is how I always do it. And this person over here is, this is how I always do it. And that first year of marriage is usually, or that first time together is usually that time to figure that out. However, one of the things that can really destroy relationships is when you have outside influence affecting the two of you and what your expectation is. So it's not necessarily your expectation. It's, well, my parents do it this way and this is the right way. And then you have another person, well, my family does it this way and that's the right way. Instead of coming together and say, okay, my family's always done it this way. All right, my family's always done it this way. Now, how do we want to do it? What do we want it to look like? We have these two options, but we also have many, many other options. We don't necessarily have to fall into the way that they do it. And keeping that mentality that it has to be done the way I was raised, it has to be done because, you know, I'll never hear the end of it from my mom, or I'll never hear the end of it from my dad. They're so opinionated, and you're doing things in secret because you don't want them to find out. That is just ridiculous. The point of you creating your own relationships is you figuring out your own expectations, the two of you figuring out your own expectations, and now how do you want it to look like? Now, how do we want to live our lives? And separating from those two families of their expectations. I understand that can be hard. I understand that can be frustrating because some people genuinely feel that their way is the right way and the only way. It's not a matter of, oh, you know, we did it this way, but if you want to do it that way, great. No, you do it this way because this is the way we've always done it. Well, just because it's always been done that way doesn't make it right. Like, I don't understand how we should be just so proud that we suffered through something or that we challenged our way through it. No, make it better. If you have a relationship or you come from a family where it was chaotic and it was a lot of intensity and that wasn't fun for you, don't continue it. Or if your partner comes from yelling and you're going, that I don't want to keep doing that, then don't. That's the expectation. The new expectation is we're going to start new expectations. It doesn't matter what our parents are saying. It doesn't matter what our in-laws are saying. It doesn't matter that the family has been doing this for generations. This is how we want to do it. And then you get to decide if it's right or wrong. And you two together get to decide if you want to keep continuing that way. But just doing things because that's the way it's always been done, because there's an expectation from somebody else outwardly putting a pressure on your relationship, that is so destructive to any relationship because it can be really hard to maintain that, especially for an outsider coming into that. Now they have to live up to that expectation. That's never been their expectation. And now they're required to live up to this. It's just setting yourself and your relationship up for failure. And I know we've been talking a lot about more romantic spouse issues, but this really goes into a lot of different relationships, whether it's business relationships, whether it's just friendships, whether it's the relationships with your kids. I know a lot of parents, they put expectations on their kids when they start having children about this is the way you do it. This is how we do it. And we have to follow what grandma and grandpa say. And that's just unrealistic. You could easily destroy the relationship between you and your child because we have to follow what grandma and grandpa are saying. Or you also have, if you have an unrealistic expectation and you're trying to put that on your child, that could also ruin the relationship. The other thing is having an expectation that you've really never conveyed, that we don't talk about this, but you know, this is the rule and it's an unspoken rule. It's like, why? Why is this an unspoken rule? If it's a rule and it's important, let's talk about it. Let's say why it's important, not just because I said so. Just because that's the way grandma and grandpa did it. That's just who we are. And I just want to go all the way back to the beginning to what is your part in this? What are you expecting? What are you expecting that's rational and you just need to communicate it better? What are you expecting that's really not rational and you just have this very not healthy way of looking at things? We all do. It's really not uncommon because I tell you, we all have them. And so this isn't a shame. This isn't a guilt, but we really do. We all have some kind of expectations that are just not rational. And Only until we start looking at them can we start saying, oh, okay, that's really not rational. I'm really wanting perfection, or I'm really wanting it to look this way. And it doesn't have to look that way. It doesn't always have to be my way, or whatever your expectation is. And then the third one is really look at what expectations do you have that aren't necessarily yours, that you're following them, but you don't even really want to do them. You're just following them out of fear, or you're following them out of guilt, or because somebody else has put that expectation on you and that we have to follow it. And so really start looking at the different areas of your life. Start looking about how they're not just affecting you and your spouse, but start how they're affecting just your life, just you as an individual. Because the reality comes down to we can't change our spouse. We can't change what they're doing. We can't change how they're behaving. We can only change us. And so if we can start to understand our expectations and what we want to change in them and how we want to show up better, it's really interesting and really amazing how much our outer world starts changing once we start changing ourselves and the way that we're thinking. And the expectations that we have on ourselves, when we can recognize those, the good and the bad, the realistic and the unrealistic, once you start to really figure those out in your life, it's really amazing how your relationships with your spouse, with your children, with your parents, with your friends, you can start becoming a very grounded person because you know who you are. You know what your expectations are, and you're the one getting them. And you're the one getting yourself. It's really fascinating how much confidence it brings. I appreciate you so much listening in on our podcast. I trust that this information was helpful. If this inspired you or helped you in any way, please share it with a friend. I'm so grateful for all of you who listen, and I'm so grateful to be able to share this information. Until next time, bye.